So we should be live on YouTube right now.
Okay, assalamu alaikum everybody. Inshallah, we'll get started right now. So welcome to the Alumni Association's 2020 Healthcare Panel. Today we are featuring three of our beautiful alumni, Harry Tambu with dentistry, Wajih Hamaiman with medicine, and Hassan Salih with pharmacy. Inshallah, today we'll be going over a bunch of different categories to help students answer their questions regarding their healthcare paths and careers. So those categories include, first of all, starting off broadly, why medicine, why dentistry, why pharmacy? Secondly, we'll go over the prerequisite classes, volunteer activities and research, standardized testing, applications, and then overall the best advice for students applying to these graduate schools. So to start off, my name is NUIAA. I am a 2019 NUIAA alumni graduate. I am currently a sophomore at Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania. I'm a pre-med student majoring in public health. And inshallah, today I'll be moderating this event. So I'll go ahead and open up the panel for the panelists to introduce themselves to the audience. In any order you guys choose.
I can start. Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Hasna. I am a pharmacist at Monmouth Medical Center. I graduated from Nordiman in 2014, the same class as Wajiha and Mahra. So this is a 2014 panel. And I did the 6-year doctorate program at Rutgers, the Ernest Mario School of Pharmacy. I graduated this past May in 2020, and I'm right now doing my first year of pharmacy residency at Monmouth Medical Center in Long Branch, New Jersey.
Assalamualaikum guys, my name is Wajiha. I am a 3rd-year medical student at Rowan School of Osteopathic Medicine. Like Hasna said, I also graduated in 2014 from NUI, and then I went to NJIT for 4 years. I majored in biology, the pre-med track, and I also did 2 minors in business and entrepreneurship. And then I went to med school, did my first 2 years, and now I'm here.
Hi, assalamualaikum everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Mahira. I'm a 4th-year dental student at Rutgers School of Dental Medicine in Newark. I've been in Newark for quite some time. I did my undergraduate years at NJIT through the 7-year program. So while I was there, I worked in a few dental offices and pretty much decided early on that this is what I wanted to do. And now I'm in my 4th year of dental school, currently applying for residencies and yeah, just finishing up there. So I'm excited to hear what questions you guys have to ask us as well.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess to start off, I guess open up the panel with a very broad question as to why pharmacy, why dentistry, why medicine? And then we'll go ahead and see if anybody else has questions.
So we can keep the same order. I'll start. So why pharmacy? I always knew I was interested in healthcare. I knew I wanted to do something healthcare related, but I'll be honest, I get really freaked out by the blood and guts that's related to a lot of healthcare field. So I knew I couldn't be in anything too gory, and pharmacy seemed to fit that bill. And I was always interested, in chemistry, pharmaceuticals, and the Rutgers program really attracted me in that you get your doctorate in 6 years. And the PharmD degree is really something that opens a lot of doors. You could do a lot as a pharmacist in a bunch of different fields. So that I was looking for those different opportunities because as a high school student, I still wasn't fully decided and fully committed to what I wanted to do. So I felt pharmacy still offered me that healthcare path, but at the same time, it gave me a lot of options.
So I've always been interested in medicine ever since I think I was in elementary, middle school, high school. I always knew I wanted to do it. My dad is also a physician, so seeing someone in the family who knows how to take care of people and knows what to do whenever there is a health situation is really inspiring. You have that knowledge all the time and you can always go to that person and just basically, helping people out is a good skill, especially through healthcare and medicine. So that's why I like medicine.
Yeah, just like my friends here, I knew early on that I wanted to do something in healthcare. I wasn't really sure which path to take really, but then while I was at Nordiman, I really utilized our community to its fullest and asked different professionals if I could shadow and work in their offices. So I worked in a pediatrics office and a dental office, an ophthalmologist office, pretty much random healthcare facilities. I just wanted to see what was out there. And I really enjoyed dentistry. I liked working with my hands. I liked, the idea that a patient comes in a lot of times in pain and you can kind of alleviate their pain and alleviate their symptoms in the same visit. So I really liked that, critical thinking, working with your hands. So I decided to do the 7-year program. And then while I was in undergrad, I pretty much continued working in that office and working in a pediatric dental office to see is this really what I want to do? So I think each step of the way, it was kind of guiding me towards that path. And I really am glad I ended up taking that path as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, I guess, your inspirations and passions for your careers. As of now, there's no other questions for this topic, but to just add on, I guess, why your specific programs, what interested you to apply like the specific, pharmacy, dentistry, and medical schools, what basically brought you to, accept that and end up going there?
So I mostly applied in state out of high school. I wanted to stay in the area. I'll be honest, the Rutgers pharmacy program was the only one that I applied to because in high school I wasn't set on the pharmacy goal, like career path. So when I got in, that's when I started exploring what this meant and what the options available to me would be, and then made that decision. So I hadn't really applied to other pharmacy schools. I kind of believed that we all end up where you're meant to end up and followed that logic and went through with the pharmacy school at Rutgers.
So for me, is this question about undergrad or grad school?
More geared towards a graduate school, but your choice, yeah.
Okay, so for me, I go to Rowan. I mostly applied in state, and during interview season, you get to kind of get an idea and feel of how the school is. And I felt that school was the best match for me in terms of interacting with the students and faculty, the different opportunities they had, and being that it was in state, it was convenient for me as well to attend it.
Yeah, likewise, I kind of wanted to stay close to my family, and my family's from Central Jersey near ISCJ, so being in Newark, I knew that I would, be able to come visit them regularly, and I stayed in the dorm during my undergrad and dental school as well, but it was always close enough that I could come back home when I wanted to see my family, and I guess it was decided early on that if I continued with the dental program, I would be at Rutgers Newark, like the UMDNJ hospital campus there. So I knew that going in, but what was appealing to me about the program was that it was a set track, and your curriculum was laid out. You would finish your undergrad in 3 years, and then jump right into it. So I liked knowing what was next. But also when I visited NJIT, like it felt like a very homey environment, and resembled NUI a little bit, like a close-knit community. And Wajiha was one of my good friends at NJIT as well. So we kind of built our own, small niche there. So I felt like it was a good fit.
Awesome. So I guess we'll move on to our next topic of just in general life in undergrad. So to start off, I guess we could list the classes you were required to take in order to apply to your graduate programs. And then after that, we'll get into details in regards to like classes that are recommended. But as of now, required prerequisite classes.
Sure. So I started my program straight from high school. So the NUI classes that we take were fulfilling of the requirements to get into the pharmacy school. You didn't have to have any additional prerequisite classes. And then the structure of the pharmacy program is 2 years of a set curriculum of prerequisite classes to start graduate school then for 4 years. So just like Maher mentioned, it's a very like structured program, all of these programs, which was a huge attraction to me to have like my schedules built out. So the first 2 years, it's the general stuff, Gen Chem 1 and 2, Gen Bio 1 and 2, physics, a statistics class, some basic like XPOS writing classes, and calculus. Those were the first 2 years, and that's all built into the program. And then once those 2 years of prerequisites are done, that's when you begin the graduate school that is more focused in pharmacy.
So if you're pre-med, you can do any major that you like, but there are some prerequisite classes that you have to take. For me, I did biology as my major, so a lot of those classes that were required for my major were also part of the requirements for medical school, so that made it easier. It's similar to the pharmacy prereqs. We had, you have to take psychology, biology, Chem 1, Chem 2, Physics 1, Physics 2, organic chemistry 1 and 2, calculus, statistics, and I think that's about it. And then obviously your major classes and the requirements of your school.
Yeah, just like my friends had mentioned already, pretty much the same prerequisites. In high school, I think Neurali Man does a good job of preparing you for any of these, courses. And you should be able to, choose any undergraduate degree that you like. It's just that you have to make sure you have the prerequisite courses. So for my program, it made sense to do biology. I did a BA in biology because that's how the curriculum is set out. But I do have classmates who did the same program and they chose to do biomedical engineering, which had a whole different set of courses, but it's really up to you. And I just want to mention that just because we did these programs doesn't mean that's the only way to, achieve your goals and go to medical school, dental school, pharmacy school. There are other ways, and I think a lot of us would agree that a vast majority of students did not do these programs. It's just a coincidence that some of us did. So don't feel like if I don't do a program, I can't go to medical school or dental school or pharmacy. As long as you have the prerequisite courses, you can apply as a traditional student, which is what most people do.
Sounds good. Do you guys, I guess, recommend any classes before applying? I know there's always specifically from a pre-health student's perspective, there are always classes that they enjoy taking before going to graduate school. They feel like it helps them in the upper level curriculum there, or just a matter of them enjoying the class. Any recommendations on any classes for pre-health students other than the required courses?
Yeah, I would say college is the time to explore in doing what you enjoy. If you have these elective options to other than your prerequisite classes, have fun. Take the crazy courses offered. There's always these niche classes of different interests. The different humanities classes can be really interesting and they fulfill the requirements. Like for pharmacy school, each semester we had to take 2 electives in addition to our prerequisite classes. So with that, you have fun. I took poli-sci, criminal justice. I think I took a creative writing class. I think at one point I took a Harry Potter seminar. Anything that fulfills the requirement and you can have fun with, why not? Explore your interests and you might find another passion that you like too.
I definitely agree with that. Make use of the time that you have in undergrad. For me, I was able to get 2 minors done while I was also doing my major requirements, and I had a lot of fun with that. And there was also some cool classes that I took, like literature and cinema, and just make sure that you do those fun classes before you're in grad school, because you're not gonna have time for that later on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think one thing I wish I knew going into college was that the way you schedule your classes and the classes that you choose per semester really determines what you get out of it. Whether, what Jihad did, how you can get a minor just by taking classes that you enjoy, and maybe you need 1 or 2 extra classes to get a minor out of it. So I would recommend finding somebody maybe 1 or 2 years older than you, who's already experienced some of these classes, knows what the prerequisites are, and then they can help you make a better selection. Also, you want to make sure that you're focusing on your GPA, and you don't want to take too many classes that would compromise your GPA, and you can sometimes find boosters that help you to stay on track. So I would definitely recommend speaking to older students at your school.
Sorry, if I could just add something. Speaking of booster classes and things that are interesting, I know Rutgers does a really good job of having the Middle Eastern department. So if you take those Arabic classes, I took an Islamic art history class, which was amazing. So you could learn a lot about our culture and history while still also getting the degree that you want.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, those are great points. I think it's definitely, unfortunately, it's not that it's just that pre-health students are always worried about GPA and grades and, checking the things off the checklist and getting everything done. Oftentimes they lose track of what the point of college is and exploring and, addressing their other interests, because there's so much more than just your path to whatever career you're on. But I guess in terms of this whole overall mental stress, pre-health students commonly going on Reddit and SDN and all these websites online and stressing themselves out about getting accepted and GPAs and being very grade centric. What are your recommendations for overcoming that mental struggle and staying on top of it, but also not making that your full-time priority?
Well, I would have like two tips. One is that when you're less stressed out, you do better. So when we talk about all these extra classes or fun things that like spark your interests and passions, that helps your GPA because now you're doing better in these easier classes because you're enjoying it. But I know that's easy to say and not easy to do because when you're really stressed out, it just affects everything. I would say the number one thing is to be aware of your mental health and aware of where you are and your support network, lean on friends and family. And it's really important to build a strong support network when you're going through a stressful program, because then everyone's on the same page and they can support you, you can support them. It's really important to have friends in the same program as you because they know exactly what you're going through and they can help you through it. You know, lean on your community because that's what they're there for. And don't be afraid to say like, I need help or I'm going through it or I'm struggling with this. It's really important to be honest with yourself because that at the end of the day is the only thing that's going to help you.
I think Hasna made a lot of good points there. I can agree that I've been on SDN and Reddit and everything, looking at scores, looking at stats, looking at everybody else and what they're doing. But at the end of the day, it's you that you should be focusing on. Don't look at what anyone else did because, you know, you could stand out to somebody else as well. The pre-health committees and the committees and the med schools are going to be looking at you. They're not going to be looking at, you know, other people's stuff, and you want to make sure that you stand out on your own. As far as stress levels, you want to make sure that you take time out to do something that's not related to med school, that's not related to your, you know, college classes or anything like that. I would recommend taking like Friday nights off and just, you know, hang out with your friends, do something fun, forget about it, you know, because we all need it and we're all victims of stressing out like crazy because that's what pre-health tracks do to us. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that stress is to be expected because, you know, a lot of us that enter these pre-health, you know, careers, we all hold ourselves to a very high standard. And like, if I don't get an A, I'm going to be hard on myself. But at the end of the day, like everyone in your cohort, everyone who's pre-med, pre-health in general, is going through it at the same time. So I think one of the biggest blessings to me in undergrad was living in the honors college dorm. I would say like half of the students were pre-health or, you know, in one of, even a lot of them from my own program. And so although you are taking a heavier course load than a majority of the students, although you may be having a fully loaded semester every semester, at the end of the day, you're surrounded by individuals who are just as motivated. So that helps you to, you know, stay on track. But at the same time, like how Wajiha said, it's important to know yourself and take time off for your own sanity. I mean, in dental school, there were many times, I would say a majority of the first 2 years where I had maybe 4 or 5 exams a week. Like it's just constant exam to exam. So you kind of have to look at your schedule and plan your free time, which is something that we weren't used to in high school. Like we knew we had some free time in the day. So as you get into these careers, it's important to manage that stress before you get burnt out, because I think that's the key to like staying motivated and staying on top of your stuff.
Can I also add, I know we mentioned SDN and Reddit and all of that. A lot of those are like toxic threads online where people, it's all a front, just like Instagram isn't real. A lot of these online communities aren't real. And a lot of pre-health students put up this front that they're doing well or acing exams, and the rest of us are just like, oh gosh, I'm struggling. But it's like, once you break that down, a lot of your classmates are going through the same exact thing as you. You're not dumb. It's not that you can't keep up. Everyone's on the same page, and a lot of the time they're just fronting. So don't feel bad about yourself and your grades.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Hasna. Like, it was funny because if you're not familiar with SDN, it's Student Doctor Network, which is a lot of, I think at every level of pre-health careers in college, undergrad, high school, students will log in to like read what other people are writing about. And for the first time, I ran into someone at school who used to post all the time on Student Doctor Network. And their posts definitely didn't match their personality in real life. And I thought to myself, these are the people that, you know, feel empowered behind a keyboard, and you shouldn't take that to heart. Everyone's struggling the same, you know, the same things, and everyone's going through it at the same time. So I would say take it with a grain of salt. Definitely do your research, but don't take it to heart when you read what other people are experiencing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great points. I think pre-health students in general, you're absolutely correct. They fall into like this, I guess, like this challenge and unfortunately like hole of like comparing themselves to others just because when you're put in a competitive environment, you want to make sure that you're on top of it. And I think the easiest way to do it is to compare yourself to somebody else who's in that same journey. And it ends up being that, you know, you make assumptions about yourself and judgments about yourself, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, everybody is going to reach their goal at the end of the day. It's just a matter of like re-strategizing and figuring out what you're good at and what you need to improve on. But those are definitely very good points. You guys mentioned, you know, taking time off of like just academics, like getting your mind off of that. That's, you know, absolutely very important. There's so much more to just the GPA and the classes that you're taking as a pre-health student. So I think now would be like a great time to transition to, you know, life outside of school, whether that be, you know, still career oriented, whether you're, you know, engaging yourself in volunteer activities or shadowing or just taking time off in general. One of our viewers asked a question, what would you advise high school students besides taking majors to do to go into the medical field to enhance their interest in the medical field? So yeah, if you guys have any comments about that.
So I would say if you're interested in medicine or any other pre-health field and you're in high school, you want to make sure that you get the exposure now. You want to shadow a physician, try to link up with somebody that you know from the community. I know the Muslim community has a lot of doctors. Try to, you know, get connections with them and, you know, go into their offices, see what they're doing. There's also EMT squads that you can join right now. And by the time you finish high school, you can become a full-time EMT, and that looks really good on your applications. And just volunteer, make sure your grades are good. If you're trying to apply to a program, focus on your SATs, focus on your grades, and also do something that you like, because you don't want to just seem like you're into like just medicine. Like we all have other passions, we all like to do other things. So don't be shy to like show those things off too. For me, I really like fashion, interior design, and just being creative. So I used to intern at this clothing company called Bobo, and I actually wrote my college essay on it. And it kind of, you know, shows a different side of you that, you know, application committees see, and they look at you and be like, okay, like, you know, it's not only medicine, she's actually a person. So yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, I think it's really important to differentiate yourself, both to find your own passions, but also differentiate yourself from everyone else applying. Everyone that's applying to these schools will have the prerequisites done. Everyone will have taken Gen Bio. Everyone's GPAs will be the same. You want to set yourself apart. I mean, I didn't apply to grad school in the traditional way. I applied out of high school, but from high school, a big part of my application was actually like, I was huge into mock trial in high school. Mock trial has nothing to do with pharmacy. So it was just something that kind of like sets you apart. You know, these are my passions. And you talk about how the different skills you learned throughout your different extracurricular activities, while not specifically related to pharmacy, the skills you learned are still applicable. Critical thinking, public speaking, like interaction with people. Like you could still use the skills you learn in other areas and apply those to your applications.
Yeah, overall, you know, if you enter one of these fields, you're constantly applying for the next position. What I mean by that is when you're in high school, you're applying for college. When you're in college, you're applying for grad school. I'm finishing grad school and now I'm applying for residency. And it feels like, you know, the same themes will keep repeating themselves. Interviewers will a lot of times like to see a well-rounded student. So obviously, if you're at the interview, if you've made it that far, they already know you have the grades and they know that you are somebody that can learn and grow like that, but they want someone who is interested in what they're going for. So definitely do shadowing experiences. I know it's hard with COVID now and like there's a lot of restrictions there, but ask around, ask current students, and they want like a real person, not just a robot. So do what you like, find something, a hobby, and find a way to incorporate that, like Hasna said, with mock trial, speaking skills. In high school, I did a lot of community service with Hunger Van, and I think that's something that they want something that you're passionate about. It doesn't really matter what it is, but something outside of school. like currently I work as a makeup artist on weekends, not every weekend, but whenever I have time. And that always comes up in interviews that, oh, that's so interesting, something that they can remember you by. So don't just focus on school, but find things outside of school that set you apart.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important. You guys are definitely right in the fact that, when you're applying, the pool of students is generally going to have the same stats, and it tends to be what else that they're doing that differentiates one from the other. Do you guys recommend to viewers any specific internships or programs, outside of classes that you guys may have come across, or you got a chance to apply to, didn't get a chance to apply to, I would recommend looking into during undergrad?
So there was one program that I did after 11th grade, and I still have the best memories from this program. It was called Summer Science Scholars Academy. I'm not sure if they still have it, but Robert Wood Johnson Medical School has summer programs for high school students that are interested in pre-health. And of course, everyone, I think they had like 12 or 14 students, and it was a 4-week summer program where you got to learn alongside third-year med students. So they actually took you to a cadaver lab, you got to do dissections. It was really cool. Like, I didn't expect to be so involved in everything that they were teaching us. But it was basically like 4 weeks of like an intro to medical school, and you got to do research also at the same time. So I would say ask around and look into summer programs way in advance, because some of the deadlines are maybe 6 months before the program even starts. But that was one that I think pre-health students, if you're interested, you should look for something like that.
I think there's also something that NJMS offers. It's called Mini Medical School. It happens during the school year, and I think it's like after school for high school students. And then if you're interested in research, they have a lot of research programs at different universities and medical schools. So whatever medical school you're interested in, you could look online, and they should have something for high school students who are interested.
Yeah, I know the Rutgers Pharmacy School also does like Shadow of Pharmacy student days, where high school students can come in and they'll do like the full day program with the pharmacy students, and those students will also answer any questions you have. But again, because of COVID and the different restrictions, I'm not really sure what's available right now. You might have to do some more research and see if these programs have adopted a more virtual style, if they're still available in person. So that might take a little more research just to see what's available with the current restrictions.
Yeah, absolutely great programs. I think it's important, learning from other people in the community and reaching out about these programs and getting to know more about what you're going for. Another viewer asked another question. Have you ever felt? Oh, sorry. Another viewer asked the question: have you ever felt a sense of imposter syndrome during your respective graduate programs, and if so, how have you dealt with it?
Absolutely. I mean, who hasn't? I think imposter syndrome especially kicks in like when we were talking about earlier. Everyone seems like they have it together and you're the only one that's struggling, and you feel like, I don't belong here, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing well. But take a step back. You got into the program, so obviously a panel of people, not just one person, not you, a panel of people judged that you had the requirements to get into this program and felt that you were adequately prepared to be in the program. So you have to trust in that. And then the whole point of school is to learn. Like, you're not going to become a physician, a dentist, a pharmacist overnight. It's not that you get into the program and you're expected to know everything. It's the opposite. School is to learn. You're supposed to make mistakes. You're supposed to grow. You're supposed to be developed into the professional clinician that you want to be. Even now, like, I'm technically a licensed pharmacist, but I still feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm in a residency program to learn. And I mean, they tell us every day, and you have to take a step back and think, like, I am here in an educational program to learn. It's okay if I make mistakes. Everyone around me is also struggling, but I got in, so I have some merit to my name. And yeah, just keep reminding yourself that you got in for a reason.
Yeah, in all of these healthcare professions, you will run into a lot of strong personalities. That's just how it is. Not just among your classmates, but among your attendings as well. So, for example, like in dental school, the way it works is the first 2 years are purely didactic and lab, so you learn how to do all the procedures, and then third and fourth year, you're treating patients on your own, pretty much. And so it's easy to be discouraged sometimes when you feel like you've done everything according to the book, but then your supervisor will always have something to say. And I think one of the most important takeaways is to get used to constructive criticism, because you don't want to take that personally. And then you get into that whole imposter syndrome type of mentality where you're like, oh, I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. But no, you are cut out for this. You're working hard, and that's all it takes. You need to just set your mind to it and know that I'm here to learn, like Hasna said. And you come out of it knowing that, okay, I'm going to take this criticism and turn it into bettering myself. And so that's something that it comes with time. It doesn't happen right away. But yes, imposter syndrome is very real. But you just have to get yourself into the right mindset and avoid falling into that trap as well.
Yeah, I agree with both Maher and Hasna. Mindset is really important. You just have to tell yourself that you're supposed to be here, you're meant to be here. A bunch of people looked at your application and thought you were qualified enough to be here, and you're qualified as much as anybody else in the program. Like Maher also mentioned, the first 2 years of medical school are all academic. You're always just, with your nose in a book, learning, taking exams. But then when it comes to third and fourth year, you're actually practicing what you've been learning. And like she said, there's always going to be something that your attending is going to point out and criticize, and you have to be okay with, you're in the program because you're learning. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to be making mistakes, and you have to be okay with that, because that's why it's called school. You're learning.
Yeah, you didn't accidentally get into the program that you're in. And if you did, that's on whoever let you in, not on you. You ended up where you're supposed to end up. Trust in Allah, trust in your faith that, this is where I'm meant to be. And, if someone makes you feel bad for asking a question or asking for help, that's on them. You're in a learning program. You're here to learn. It's okay to ask for help.
I guess to build off of that, was there a specific time in your undergraduate journey where you had to fix something major? You were like, oh, I have to work on this, and you got advice from somebody, and that was your, I guess, turning point moment of doing the best you can and doing better?
Yeah, I feel like with every class, I feel like college is a bit different than high school, especially in the pharmacy program. Like Maher mentioned, you have exams, maybe 5 exams a week. Sometimes it's just really hard to juggle all of those exams. Maybe out of 5, one of them just doesn't go well because you're human and you can't commit that amount of time and effort to every single class. So I feel like a lot of pharmacy school was just learning to balance my time and how to study and when to study, how much effort to put into each class, and moving around my efforts to cover all my classes because you have 6 exams coming up. And, maybe I didn't do well in chem this week, so I have to focus more on chem next week and less on bio, and kind of this juggling of classes. But I think that comes with time and practice. I can't say that there was any one defining moment, because I feel like all 6 years kind of melded together now. And it was just a whole learning process throughout all 6 years. It was constantly learning how to better manage my time.
I think there was one time where me and Maher both had an orgo exam, and we had no idea how to solve the problems. We printed out practice exams and whatnot, and we were just looking at it blankly. And there was this upperclassman who really an expert on the subject. So we went to him, and he kind of explained everything for us and just helped us throughout the way. And I think we did really well in the exam. So look for people who are trustworthy, and your upperclassmen, they will help you out a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In high school, I was never one to study with a group. I felt like if I studied with a group, it was more of us just having fun. But in college and in dental school as well, I feel like if you spend time with people who are just as motivated and maybe people that have different strengths than you tend to learn from each other. So although Wajiha and I have always been the best of friends, when it came time to studying organic chemistry, we were studying organic chemistry and that was it. So we made a group of people who maybe we would study different subjects together, and some of us were better at biology, some were better at anatomy, some helped tutor us for organic chemistry. So I think finding different ways of studying once your workload becomes more intense, that's also part of the learning process. Like Hasna said, basically learning how to learn is part of the job itself too, because not only is it a long process getting through school, but once you leave school too, you're always learning. You always have to do continuing education and things like that. So yeah, it's never ending process there.
Yeah, for sure. Those are really great points. In terms of like research, pre-health, there's this common notion that I know schools constantly telling pre-health students, I mean, you don't really need research, upperclassmen telling pre-health students, it's not like mandatory, but everybody in their mind is like, I have to do it. What are your like suggestions about research, your recommendations, your experiences from research, whether you did or didn't do research, if you did research, if you did it in your undergraduate institution, or if you did it with outside programs?
So for me, I did research in undergrad. I haven't done it in med school yet. But for that, I'm not sure if it's mandatory or not, but I did have it in my application, and I know it betters your application. I found it through basically contacting like a bunch of labs on campus that I was interested in, and letting them know why I was interested and that I'd like to be a part of their lab. And after emailing a bunch of people, you do get responses, and I was basically an assistant in the lab, and I worked there, I think, from my sophomore year to my senior year. And I think it like really helped out my application.
So when we say research, I think there's two general categories of research that you can get involved in. One would be laboratory based, where you're assigned to do like pipetting and sorting out lab results and such. And then the other form of research is more publication based research, like existing research, where you're compiling maybe scientific journals or systematic reviews of papers that already exist. So in undergrad, I didn't do any research, partly because I was already in the program and I knew that like my workload was already pretty heavy. So if I were to take on research, I don't know, I just wasn't sure if it would work with my schedule at the time, but I really wanted to do it. And I think Wajiha had done some at Rutgers, and that really helps to set your application apart. And then in dental school, there is an opportunity to do research every summer. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it last summer because of COVID. So then I transitioned to like a more paper-based research. It was actually on COVID-19. So it is fun to do more research on like current events related topics. But I'm not sure if it's something that's required. It may be required in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where a lot of people talk about it and you hear a lot about it and you feel like I should be doing research, but like you don't really have an understanding of what it is or if you really should be doing it. I don't think it's technically mandatory. I think it's just like an unspoken pressure that you should be doing research in your summers. I think with high school students, the opportunities are limited, especially now with COVID. I'm sure a lot of labs are like limiting the number of people that are allowed inside them. I would still reach out. You could reach out to different like labs and universities and see if there are opportunities for you. In pharmacy school, I didn't do anything in the first 2 years, like the undergrad of pharmacy school, but in my graduate school, I did get involved on smaller research projects. It wasn't like lab-based, it was more like what Mahra was talking about, like collection of systematic data and review. So there definitely are opportunities, especially as you advance through the program and you get to know professors. You could always ask them like, hey, can I work with you on this or can I work with you on that? And that's the best way, I think, to find different research projects. It doesn't have to be some like original groundbreaking scientific research project.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, like you guys said, it's definitely not something that's mandatory. It's just, like as I'm saying, the unspoken, I guess, thing on people's checklist. Everybody wants to get it done. Everybody wants to get involved. I guess, like in terms of doing research, what do you guys think are the benefits of doing research? Like, obviously you don't need it, but if you do participate in research, what do you mainly get out of it? Or what do graduate schools want you to get out of doing research?
I would say with the second type of research that Maher was talking about in terms of like sifting through data and literature, it really is more about the critical thinking of evaluating scientific literature and being able to understand what, like when you're reading, for example, like I'm in pharmacy, right? So a lot of what I read is like clinical trials and publications. So when you're reading a clinical trial, how to evaluate if the way the trial is set up was done correctly, the biases in the trial, the statistics, like it's more about the critical thinking and then how you're able to evaluate the literature. And we use that every day. Like I now am in a residency program, and if I have a question, my preceptor will be like, well, what does the literature say? So then I have to go and do like a quick systematic review of the literature and evaluate it and come up with an answer for my patients. So it is definitely something that I do use on a daily basis. Like those skills that you learn in research, you continue to use throughout your career.
Like Hasna said, I think the most important thing that you gain from research is the critical thinking skill, because that's what you're going to be using when you are assessing your patients and trying to figure out what's going on. You have to come up with a bunch of different diagnoses that you think is happening and what different tests that you want to do to prove that diagnosis. So it kind of gets you in that thinking mode, like, okay, like what's going on? What do I need to do? How do I figure this out? So I think that's why they want you to do research, and because it gets you in that mode of thinking.
Yeah, in undergrad, I actually didn't do formal like laboratory research, but two of the courses I took were recommended from upperclassmen, and they were based on research. So the entire premise of the course was to basically come up with a collection of scientific journals that tell you about a certain disease. And I think although they're two like pretty challenging courses, what you get out of that is like a critical thinking skill, and like what Hasna said, analyzing a paper and not just taking it for face value, understanding what are the motives behind this paper, what can you use from this information to help your patient. A lot of times in dental school, you're talking to your attending and you give them like the treatment plan and say, okay, this is my diagnosis, this is how I would do the treatment. And then they'll ask you to back your treatment plan with scientific evidence. So you have to kind of learn how to sift through information quickly and, be familiar with the format of these research papers. So yeah, I think definitely the earlier on you start to read into these articles, and if you're already interested in it, it's free. You just go on PubMed and you can search up a topic that you're interested in and read articles. I mean, definitely everything won't be at your level in the beginning, but it's a good place to start if you are interested.
But like to any high school students watching this, don't get too like stressed about that you don't know how to evaluate medical literature. It's a huge part of the health sciences, like that evaluation of medical literature, but it's pretty much built into the programs, at least for pharmacy school. Like we have pretty intensive courses on drug information and literature evaluation. Like they teach you how to do this because you're supposed to be a clinician who uses evidence-based medicine to treat your patients. So it's definitely something that's built into the programs, and don't get too pressed about like knowing how to evaluate clinical trials at this point.
Yeah, this is definitely way beyond the scope of high school. It's just that all three of us are towards the end of our, formal education. So that's where we're at right now. But in high school, we definitely were not, reading up on PubMed, and it's beyond the scope of high school, definitely.
It is fun though. So, I mean, if you have a free afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole, I guess, event can be a little bit overwhelming for high school students still trying to figure out, I guess, their niche for like college life, and, figuring out which college they want to go to and what they want to study and all that. I guess still in the realm of, undergraduate life as a pre-health student, every campus obviously is different. And you guys might have, it's like every campus might have different resources available for the pre-health students, and then that may impact them very differently. In your undergraduate experiences, have you guys, I guess, utilized any resources, whether that be tutoring, whether that be the Career Center, whether that be like, I guess, just building relationships with professors in general, that have helped you throughout your undergraduate journey?
I would say that I wish that I utilized the resources available to me more than I did in undergrad. Because I think coming out of like the smaller social bubble of NUI, where I had like 20 classmates, going to Rutgers in New Brunswick, where my classes were like 400 students. I felt very like overwhelmed by it all. And I didn't know the resources available to me, the different tutoring centers, the different office hours and classes. And I think that's where it's really important, like we mentioned earlier, is to make friends with upperclassmen that can kind of guide you through the process, or even just like a quick Google search of like what's available on your campus is really important. Like looking back, I wish I had taken advantage of more of the resources available to me, because they're definitely there. And that way you can make your very large college experience much smaller and that you feel more comfortable with like the one-on-one tutoring or the different resources that they definitely do have available.
I think what I really liked about NJIT, and I think Maher can agree to this, is that it was a much smaller school, and it allowed us to interact with a lot of people, and we got a lot of information from upperclassmen. We were very close with our pre-health committee. They helped us out a lot. I feel like they kind of structured what we needed to do and in a timely fashion. Otherwise, we wouldn't be submitting our personal statements, in October when they're due in June. It kind of made us get those things done on time. And they had mock interviews for us. They read over our personal statements. It was a whole team of people that were watching over our applications and constantly giving us advice on how to present the best version of ourselves to our graduate programs. And I think that's very important when you're in college.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Wajih had just said. At NJIT, I think I'm really glad that all of us were forced early on to build connections with the director of the pre-health committee. And, I remember thinking as a first semester in college, why am I in this meeting? Like they're talking about applications and I'm just worried about my bio test on Monday, right? But at the same time, it forced you to, build connections with people who are very influential at the school, and you're paying tuition, and that's their job, is to be there for you, to help you. So a lot of times we don't seek help because we don't know how to, but I assure you that all of those outlets are there. Whether it's with somebody who can help you write your personal statement, guide you with choosing the right courses. And maybe when you first start, you won't know any older students, but there's definitely an office that is set up to help you with that. I think Wajih knows him as well. Our pre-health director at NJIT was very helpful. And I took 2 courses with him, those 2 research courses. And it's funny because 5 years later, he wrote me a recommendation letter for residency because they wanted somebody who was, not associated with your graduate education. But it's important to keep those connections and, meet with people. You never know when it's going to come up again in the future. So I would say definitely take advantage of that and find places where you can make connections as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess made great points. You're paying tuition to go to the college. There are free resources that can help you not only better your application, but better your performance in classes, and meeting upperclassmen. And I'm sure in a college setting, it's always easy to, it's not always easy to ask for help, but when you do, there are a lot of resources to help you. There are a lot of upperclassmen who have been in a similar position. I mean, I definitely, agree with the fact of it's always great to choose somebody who's above you a year or two, who's following the same journey, just to be able to ask them about the resources they use, because sometimes you're unaware or they're not advertised as much as you think they should be. So I guess finding those resources is one of the most important things. Just in general, like just to wrap up our, undergraduate, journey and experiences, how have you guys just, dealt with stress in general? I know you guys mentioned finding things outside of classes, taking breaks. Are there any consistent things that you guys, like very unrelated to your careers, that you guys felt was necessary for, rejuvenation during your journey?
I would say try to find your friends very early on. Like we went from, when I mentioned earlier, my classes in the beginning were like 400 students. So I went from NUI with the 20 students to the 400 student classes, and I felt very lost. And I think when you need help or someone to lean on or a community support network, it's very important to build that network early on. I'm not saying that like the first person you make friends with in your Orgo class is like going to be your best friend that you have to stick with for the next 6 years. But when you do click with someone, if you go to MSA meetings and you find your group of people, those people are really what's going to help you through the college experience, because they're also going through the same experiences as you. So when your college experience feels very large and overwhelming, just try to make it smaller, like reel it in and find your group of friends to lean on throughout the rest of the years that you have.
I know for us in undergrad, after we finished an exam, we would always celebrate and go out to eat to the local restaurants, and just, you know, spend the day together after, relaxing, just doing whatever we wanted to do. And even in med school, we do the same thing. After an exam, everybody gets together and just, you know, does what they want to do, relaxes, eats. I always went home over the weekends after an exam and just, you know, chilled with my family.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mentioned this earlier about planning out your schedule and planning out your free time. So I would really recommend not just planning when you're going to take your mind away from school, but also thinking of what to do with your time, because it's good to sit home and, you know, relax once in a while, but then you're going to want to take a break and go away from that whole atmosphere. So if you make plans with your family or make plans with your friends, sometimes that's just a good way to, you know, get away from that stress. And one thing that I really found important was coming back to your roots. And what I mean by that is, as like NUI students, we were so closely tied to the masjid. Like, imagine going to the masjid every day for salah, and then you go to college and you just pray on your own every day. And it's kind of isolating in a way. But I would say when you do come back home, you may not be living at home for college, but when you do come back home, try to go back to your roots. I think all of us can attest to this. When we would come back from college for winter break and then meet up at ICJ and then go out for a dinner or something, and just that feeling of coming back home is something that's really important to hold on to.
I also wanted to mention that wherever you go, make sure you find like the MSA and be active in it, make friends with them. If you're moving away from home, it'll help you feel closer, having that close knit of people. Make sure you like find out when they do Jummahs on Fridays, because it helps out, because you're so focused on your studies that you forget you know, why you're doing this, and you know, just it gives you little reminders every week, which are really good and helpful for you.
Yeah, even in dental school, I didn't realize that we would have such a close-knit MSA in dental school. I thought everyone would be pretty focused on their own studies, but once I joined, I realized that there was a medical and dental, Muslim Med and Dental Student Association. So I joined that, and we really tried to bring our community together, and we do like halakas really frequently, and it's just nice to touch base with people that you share a lot of commonality with. So definitely agree with Wajiha on that. Like, try to find, it doesn't have to be like the MSA of the school, but find your friends that, you know, remind you of your values, and, you know, keep a good group of friends around.
Absolutely. Find your people and find the people that ground you in your religion, your values, your culture, your schoolwork. It's really important to surround yourself with a solid group of friends. And that's a two-way street, you know, you give them support, they give you support. And it's really the only thing that kept me sane for like 6 years in pharmacy school.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are awesome points. It's really important. You need to ground yourself throughout the whole journey. It's going to be rough. And I know pre-health students and high school students and even graduate students joining us today, I mean, are they're probably thinking the same thing. It's a rough journey, and to be able to surround yourself with people who are undergoing the same journey and are sharing the same values, I guess will help you in so many ways, and you will help them in so many ways. And even today, I mean, we have students who are interested in dentistry, medicine, and pharmacy, but we have other students who are also just, you know, not sure of which exact medical career they want to join, and they're just here for more exploration, more knowledge. We have another question in the panel, in the chat. If I am interested in medical school but not interested to be a medical doctor, what other professions are out there after graduating from medical school? So yeah, if you guys are familiar with any other healthcare careers that may be similar to medicine in general, but just to help, you know, somebody out.
So I know there is a physician assistant program that's for 2 years, and then you basically, I don't know exactly the difference between the different privileges you get when you graduate, but I know that's an option for people. There's also nursing school, there's nurse practitioner. Those are the different things that I know of that are also in the medical field, but not a medical doctor.
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I wouldn't go to medical school if I didn't want to be a medical doctor. I mean, that's a very that pathway of medical school leads you to be an MD. There are a bunch of healthcare fields out there that you can do after undergrad or from high school, like what you have mentioned. You could do advanced practitioner nurses, APNs, PA school. The physician's assistant is a great program. I know Rutgers has one. Dentistry, pharmacy, like there are a bunch of different healthcare fields out there that you can explore, but I don't think you would go to med school if you didn't want to be a doctor.
Just to add to that really quick, sometimes we think we know what we want, but then you'll go and experience something for the first time and think, oh, this is totally different from what I was expecting. And that's part of the reason why a lot of these programs want to see that you've had a significant amount of exposure to the field before you commit yourself to it. So I would say, okay, let's say you're interested in optometry. I would try to ask if you can shadow an optometrist, and see what the actual job entails. Because I mean, on paper, sometimes things seem different than what they actually are once you're practicing. So I would say, regardless of what you choose or regardless of what you're considering, definitely, experience your options if you can.
And to that point, I would also say it's not set in stone if you decide out of high school. I'm just using pharmacy as an example because that's what I went through. Like if you decide to start the pharmacy program and 2 years into the prereqs, you're like, this is not for me. Like if that's really a decision that you are sure of that this is not for me, you're not bound by law to continue to be a pharmacist. Like you can switch out or explore other passions or look at other interests. Like it's not the end of the world if you decide coming into college that I want to be a pre-health major. And then somewhere along the way, you're like, never mind, I'm not doing this. That's totally fine. It's okay to change your mind. Just try to have a plan, explore your different passions. Like Mahara's been mentioning, shadow the different professions, see what a day in the life of is like, and you'll find something. I mean, it's not set in stone.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think it's just the whole journey is overall so grueling, and I mean, in general, a career in the healthcare profession, it requires a lot of years of study. Whether you do nursing, PA, dentistry, pharmacy, medicine in general, you're gonna have to dedicate years of study to, achieve that career and work in that field. And I think that it appears pretty early on whether, somebody's interested in pursuing that career or not, because you have to have a lot of motivation, dedication to continue working. But I mean, very, very good points. And I think I definitely agree with the fact of getting the exposure and shadowing. You're going to realize early on that this is something you do or don't want to do, because I mean, you're seeing it happen in front of you. You're seeing the clinicals, you're seeing what, a day in the life is going to look like. So I think that's definitely very important. If you're feeling unsure about the specific healthcare career you want to pursue, there are endless amount of careers. I mean, you could be a first responder, you can work in a hospital, you can work in a clinic, you can work, in an office practice setting. There are so many options, and it's just, the world is your oyster in terms of exploring and figuring out what you're interested in. So I guess let me just double check if there are any other questions in this topic. Okay, so it seems that we can transition on to the dreadful standardized testing. Okay, so probably, the most dreadful part of people's application process. I mean, maybe not for all, but for most, standardized testings for medical school, dental school, and pharmacy school. I guess just as an intro, what were your experiences? And leaving those experiences behind, moving on, what have you learned from those experiences in general?
I can go first only because I'll have a short answer. So if you do the high school program where it's straight from high school at the Rutgers and a lot of other straight from high school pharmacy programs, you are exempt from the standardized test to get into pharmacy school. So the standardized test is called the PCAT, similar to, MCAT and DATs and stuff. So just like any other standardized test, my advice would be to study early, have a plan, set in stone, be regimented, but there are ways to get around taking it by doing it straight from high school. It's not always a requirement, but if you are doing your traditional undergrad and then applying to pharmacy school, it is a requirement to get into pharmacy school.
So for med school, I'm sure you've all heard of the dreaded MCAT. It is an 8-hour-long exam. You take it in your 3rd year of undergrad, usually during the spring semester. It has, I believe, 4 sections: bio, chem, physio, psychology, and CARS, which is like reading comprehension. For that, I basically studied using the Kaplan set of books. I went through them around 3 to 5 times, and everybody also says that you have to practice a lot. So make sure that you set aside a lot of time to practice, and make sure you're practicing in an environment that's just like the exam, so that you can know your score is, going to be the same as what you're going to do on the exam day. You want to set up the environment just as if you're taking the exam at the exam center. And I know it's a stressful time. It's something that, you got to, if you want to go to med school, you got to do it. You got to get through it. And after, you'll feel like you conquered the world after you take the exam, because it's a very grueling exam, and you will get through it. I know it's hard at this point, wherever you guys are. It might seem like a mountain that you have to climb, but when you do get over it, it feels really nice.
So before I even begin, I think going into dental school, I was not aware of the number of boards and standardized exams and, basic licensing tests that you have to go through to complete the degree. But that being said, the first one that you will take is called the DAT. And traditional students take the DAT, I would say after their 3rd year or in spring of their 3rd year of undergrad, before applying to dental school. Since I did the 3+4 program, I took the DAT after my 2nd year. So it's a little more challenging because you haven't necessarily taken all of the courses that help prepare you for the DAT. But the subjects covered include biology, general chemistry, organic chemistry, general sciences, which is pretty much a very broad category where they can ask you anything from, general sciences. So that's a little hard to study for. And then there's a perceptual ability test, which is unique to the DAT. Basically, they want to test how you perceive 3D imaging and objects. And although it's really difficult to study for that section, it is very useful in dental school when you have to do a lot of your work in a mirror. Like when you go to the dentist and they're drilling using a mirror, you need to be able to perceive 3-dimensional movements and doing things in an opposite view. And then the last section, I believe, is math and reading. So, it is difficult to prepare for these exams when you're an undergrad, because you're thinking, this is my key to medical school, dental school, but there are plenty of resources to help you study. I think one of my greatest resources was talking to upperclassmen who did the program as well, because they have set study schedules that you can use, and you can guide yourself with those. There are also courses that you can take online, something called DAT Bootcamp, which is like an online course. And like what you have mentioned, practice tests are your best friend, because you need to be able to gauge whether you're at that level or you're ready to take the exam. And, like with anything else, I would say pace yourself and schedule your time way in advance so that you know that you're prepared before the deadline.
Yeah, also to build off, do you guys recommend dedicating a whole summer for something like this, for doing it during while you're I guess studying for your coursework during the semester? What are your recommendation suggestions? I know some students prefer to do it during the coursework, but some I guess prefer to dedicate the whole summer to just focus on studying for those standardized testings and doing the programs and review tests and whatnot.
It's really up to the student, but I would really recommend that if you're planning to take the MCAT or the DAT during your spring semester, that you plan your semesters before that accordingly, because you don't want to have 19 or 20 credits in a semester where you're planning to take a really big exam. So if you plan your 1st and 2nd year a little heavier, then you can lighten your load for that spring semester. Personally, I did take it in August, so I had 2 months to prepare during the summer, which was totally dedicated to that. I was working as a dental assistant at the same time, but you know, you can manage your time more easily over the summer. I'm sure Wajia can add to that as well.
Yeah, so honestly, it's up to you, however you want, whenever you want to take it. If you want to take a year off and study for it, that's good. And if you want to do it during your year, like Maher said, you want to allot specific time for it. So make sure your schedule isn't too crazy during that semester. You want to make sure that you have enough break time for, you know, if you're not doing so well in your practice exams, you want to be able to make up that time and bring up your score. So it's really up to the student, however they want to do it, however they want to schedule it.
Okay, that sounds like great plans. It's just a follow-up question. There are no questions on the chat as of now, but in terms of like content review, you know, some, depending on some, you know, prereq courses in certain institutions, they prepare you better than other institutions for the test. But really it comes down to the student figuring out what they need to review and what else they need to learn or learn in terms of like content review before the test. Do you recommend doing that while studying for the exam, or doing that before, making sure all the information's in there and then learning more as you go? Or yeah, just spending time for content review and then separate time for like test studying?
So what I did was I did the content review first, and then I started doing the practice exams. But you could do it any way that, you know, works for you. If you want to do some content review and then take an exam and see where you're at and see what you need to brush up on, that's also a possibility. It really depends on how you study and how, you know, what works best for you.
Yeah, personally, I took all the prerequisite courses and then started studying. I think it would be really difficult for you to try to go through your course content in undergrad and try to match it up with the standardized testing, because at the end of the day, you're studying for a test that's already been made thousands of times. So it wouldn't make sense for you to try to fit your professor's content with the test, because they're not really tailoring it only for the med students or only for the dental students. So it would probably be in your best interest to do at least some content review before you take a practice test. I'm sure you guys know those practice tests are very expensive, and you wouldn't want to waste those questions before you're prepared to challenge them. So what I did was I signed up for the DAT Bootcamp, which is an online course. It's like a subscription, I believe, for 3 months. You can use it as long or as little as you want, and it comes with a schedule for content review. So it gives a daily schedule of which subjects you're going to review, which learning materials, which textbooks you need, and it pretty much goes that way. But then you also want to balance your studying with practicing questions, because at the end of the day, you're studying for those questions. So that's a good way to balance it. I'll do a little bit of both.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I can't speak specifically to the PCAT, but I have taken a bunch of standardized exams for licensing, and it's kind of a similar thing. You have to learn how to take that exam specifically. I think it's really important. There's a lot of resources out there. They are pricey sometimes because these exams have been taken for years. They've been developed for years. So you have those course books, just like the SATs, where you have like those huge college prep textbooks. All of these exams have prep material, and it's really important to do both content review, but also make sure that you're understanding how to take the exam, because like what Jihan mentioned, it's timed, it's within a certain time frame. So it's also not just about the content, it's also about how to take that particular exam. And the best way to learn that is through practice questions and practice exams.
Yeah, I would agree. I think at the end of the day, you guys made really great points. At the end of the day, it comes down to the student and what they need to do more of, and figuring out their specific strategy. I'm sure that every student's study schedule is, at the end of the day, going to be different. You could base it off other student study schedules, but in terms of gathering the content and learning like this, the test strategies, all comes down to what the student does and when they do it and when they strategize their plan. But really great points. So I guess that wraps up our standardized testing section. Inshallah, we'll be taking like a 10-minute break for the prayer or using the restroom or snacking or whatnot. But we'll be taking a 10-minute break and returning at 1:20, inshallah. And then I guess delving into applications and advice sections, and then wrapping up the event, inshallah. Great. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back. So, one moment. Okay. So right now, inshallah, we will transition to our section about applications. Oh, actually, somebody asked a question in the chat. Okay, before we move on to applications, let's just address this question in the chat. Okay, somebody from the chat asked, when did you realize this field was the right one for you? Was there a specific moment? Also, do all pre-health programs have the same courses in the first 1 to 2 years? And when do they separate?
I can start. So like we mentioned earlier, a lot of pre-health courses, the prerequisites are similar between the different programs. So almost every pre-health program will require Gen Bio 1 and 2, Physics, Chem 1 and 2, Orgo 1 and 2, Calculus, all those classes that we mentioned, those are prerequisites. They separate, it depends whether you follow a traditional route or a non-traditional route. So if you're doing the traditional 4 years undergrad and then graduate school, so it'll separate after the undergrad, like after you actually apply and enter medical or dental or pharmacy school, that's when it becomes specific to that school. But if you're doing a non-traditional, like a combined program, for example, the pharmacy program at Rutgers, the first 2 years are those prerequisite classes, and then we differentiate for the next 4 years, we're specifically in the graduate pharmacy school. In terms of specific moments when I knew that pharmacy was right for me, I would say it wasn't until I started to get practical experience in the field. So we have a lot of rotations, like clinical rotations built into our program. And also I got a job pretty early on in the program. I worked as a pharmacy technician for all 6 years throughout pharmacy school. Just like Mahra has been mentioning all morning, like it's really important to have that shadowing experience. So I say that what cemented my choice in pharmacy was having those clinical experiences with real live patients, because it's hard to have a passion for calculus or bio like on paper. So when you start to apply those classes and you start to have these real world experiences, that's when you realize the importance and the impact that you can have on patients' lives.
So for coursework, I think it's generally pretty much the same thing for a lot of pre-health programs. If you really want to make sure, you can look up the specific program that you're interested in at the graduate school's website and see the different requirements that they want you to have. And then for the specific moment that I felt that this field was the right one for me was actually also when I was actually practicing what I learned. So that was like this year in my 3rd year where we start our rotations and we're actually in the hospital seeing patients on our own and applying all the information that we learned from the first 2 years. And when you see someone on your own and you're like, oh, wow, I know what they have, it kind of feels really good. And you know what the treatment is. And that just makes you feel satisfied that, wow, like I've been studying for so long and now I can finally make a diagnosis and treat the patient. So that's what defines your career.
Yeah, that's really good advice that Wajiha gave. For the most part, all graduate pre-health schools are going to require the same baseline courses, orgo, chemistry, bio, calculus, but the specifics are a little bit different. Like some of them require 2 semesters of calculus or 1 semester of engineering calculus. Like there are little technicalities here and there. So if you're really, interested in that, I would look up a couple medical schools that you might be interested in and just compare the prerequisite courses that they have. A lot of them are going to be exactly the same. And towards the end of your undergraduate education, if you realize that you're missing a couple prerequisite courses, which is unlikely if you've decided early on, you can always go back and make sure that you take them before you graduate. And for the other question, which was a specific moment, I would say there was one moment that stands out in my mind before I joined dental school, which was I was shadowing. I said shadowing like way too many times, but shadowing is very important. And I was shadowing one time, and there was one assistant who was scheduled that day. She suddenly got sick and had to leave early, and the dentist actually allowed me to sit chairside and be the assistant. And the dentist I was shadowing at the time was so helpful. And she didn't just do the procedure and let me hold the section. She actually taught me, the reasoning behind each of her steps in the procedure. And that's the first time where I was really interested in how does a diagnosis translate to a treatment. Somebody comes in with pain and they walk out feeling so much better. So that's when I really decided, okay, this is for me. But like what you said, it wasn't until my third year when I was pretty much on my own treating patients. And the way it works in our clinic is you do the treatment yourself. You just kind of present it to the doctor when you're done so they can check your work. And the past 2 weeks I spent on rotation in South Jersey working in a private practice. So that was my first time really being totally independent and getting a feel of when I'm working on my own, this is how it's going to be. And that's kind of what helped me realize that, okay, this is where I'm glad I took this path, and it was meant for me. So I'm sure everyone who goes into it will have that type of moment, but also don't wait around for it. You kind of have to look for it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Very great points. It's like, again and again, we mentioned that shadowing and exposure is what really affirms, I guess, one's belief in that this is what they want to do and what they want to continue doing and studying. So I guess let's transition on to applications, the final major section of today's event. So applications, you're sitting here in your, third, fourth year of undergrad, or I differently in specific programs, but you're sitting there having to compile everything you've ever done to prove to graduate schools that you are worth it and to transition from undergrad to graduate school. So I guess just an intro. I know programs, your specific programs could have been different in terms of applying, but your experiences with applying to graduate school.
So again, my experience is a little different because I did it out of high school, but the tips that I have would be to start early and have a plan, just like we've been emphasizing for the past 2 hours, is, do your research, know where you're applying, look up the deadlines, and give yourself plenty of time to put together an application, because the application is not just your work. If you have people writing letters of recommendation, if you need transcripts, if you need all these different components to come together, and that takes time and it takes other people's work too. So you really don't want to be pressed for time last minute trying to put together an application. It's just not going to work. You need to give yourself plenty of time to make sure that all the components are coming together. And especially when it comes to the essay writing and answering the questions, you don't want to just throw together something last minute. You want something that is written well and that many people take a look at. You want it to be screened by multiple people, checked by multiple people. It's a long process that you need to give it its worth in time to make sure that you do it right.
Like I mentioned earlier, try your best to link up with your pre-health committee as soon as possible, because they're going to be guiding you along the way. In our school, that's how it was. They set specific dates when components of our applications were due. So by the time the full application was due, we had everything compiled already. So if you don't have a pretty good pre-health committee at your university, you can try to make those deadlines for yourself. Be like, oh, I want to get my personal statement done by this date. I want to make sure I have all my letters of recommendations by this date. You also are going to have to list all the activities and extracurriculars that you're part of and also write about them. And then all your transcripts, that also takes a while getting them into the system. And just becoming familiar with the system and double checking everything before you submit. So like Hasna said, you want to allot, a good amount of time for working on those applications. I know for med school, they open up in your you would be submitting them in your third year of undergrad. I think around May or June they open up. And you want to make sure that you submit it right away, because there's a lot of applicants. You want them to see your application first, and you want the interviews to start rolling in. And for med school, there's also secondary applications. So once you submit the first part, there's also another one that you have to submit, which is more specific to the school that you are applying to. They send it to you and they want you to know why specifically you want to go to their school, and a few other questions. So you want to make sure that you have a lot of time to handle all of that.
I'm not sure if all undergraduate schools do this, but at NJIT, they had something called a committee letter, which is separate from your recommendation letters, but you actually get a letter on behalf of the director's department. So that's another reason why it's so important to create those connections early on in your first, second year. Make sure the director knows who you are, because at the end of the day, a letter from your director, it speaks volumes compared to just having a letter from any professor that you took a class with. So definitely try to think about that early on. Apart from the committee letter, definitely the personal statement really stands out. And one thing that people do unintentionally sometimes is that they write their personal statement like a story of their CV or a story of their resume, but they don't want your resume twice. You get your resume as part of the application, but your personal statement should really be like more of a story to paint a picture of who you are as a person. So you want to have things to talk about in your personal statement apart from just your shadowing and medicine experiences. You want to talk about like extracurriculars and things like that. So with the personal statement, I would agree with what Hasna said. Start early. If the application opens June 1st, you want to have started your application far before June 1st by preparing your personal statement and not leaving anything to the last minute with that. Oh, sorry, one more thing I remembered. A lot of medical schools, dental schools, pharmacy, I'm sure all these professional programs, on their website, they like to write about their mission statement and what they look for and what their general environment is like. So I would highly recommend going to each of those programs and making notes of the key words that they use, like entrepreneurship or collegiality, or, there are always those key phrases. And if you use those in your personal statement or try to incorporate that somehow into your application, they will pick up on it. So definitely do your research and try to start as early as you can.
Yeah, absolutely great points. And again, like with different programs comes different logistics for applying. One of our participants asked a question, is there a way to get into medical school straight from high school, or a way to exempt yourself from taking the MCAT? So I guess this is specifically tailored towards Wijia, if you're familiar with any programs.
So I remember during high school, there were a few programs that are like 7-year programs. I don't remember off the top of my head, like which specific universities did it. I know NJIT had one with St. George's University. You kind of have to look it up on Google and see, like type in 7-year program, and you'll see like a list of programs that do let you go straight into med school without, all the, requirements like the MCAT and whatnot.
Yeah, I would say there's like definitely a plethora of information online in terms of those programs. I'm aware of like the 7-year NGMS programs. New Jersey Medical Schools has an accelerated 3-4 program with I believe 7 or 8 undergraduate schools in New Jersey. So if you're looking for an in-state option for, I guess, a guaranteed medical school spot, and again, like each program is specifically tailored, like certain goals. Some require you to take the MCAT still, some do not require you to take the MCAT. And again, those are all based on certain requirements that you have to maintain throughout your undergraduate career to remain in the program and transition from undergrad to medical school without an MCAT. So yeah, there's plenty of information online, but those do exist. And you should definitely look into those, because those might have more specific requirements when applying during high school. So I guess in terms of, applications, I think a huge part of obviously applying is probably interviews. I'm sure you guys have gone on interviews one point during your journey, whether that be when you're applying in high school, applying in college, or even applying to residencies. They always want to put a face to the application. What are your recommendations generally for interviews?
Just like everything else, I think interviews require a lot of preparation as well. You obviously don't want to sound too rehearsed, but you should be practicing before your interviews. I would say to like personalize the interview as much as possible. Just like we mentioned earlier, everyone going on these interviews has the same basic requirements and GPAs as you do. So you really want to set yourself apart. And one of the best ways to do that, especially in the medical field, is to be as personable and as friendly and have those specific patient interactions examples down pat. Like making sure that you can speak to different experiences and really show that you're an empathetic, critical thinking, you're able to speak properly, you're able to interview properly, because a lot of people have great credentials on paper, but when they don't interview well. So it's really important that you practice beforehand. You know, you could do mock interviews with friends. Me and my friends, before we started our residency interviews, we would like quiz each other. We literally would go through a whole interview scenario. And that was really helpful. There are different, again, like Google it too. There are different like interview techniques, like STAR moments, like think of the situation and then I don't even remember what they stand for, but action and result. And like you kind of like walk yourself through the interview process. And I think it's really important to practice beforehand and make sure you have real life experiences to back up what they're seeing on paper.
Yeah, I would advise to know your application well, because they will, have a copy of your application with them when they're asking you questions, and they'll ask you about certain experiences that you've done. So know what you've done, make sure you're able to talk about it, rehearse talking about it with your family members, and find points that you could stand out with and highlight yourself with. And there's certain types of interviews that are group interviews for med school, and there's also this type of interview technique that they started doing called mini multiple interview for med school, and that's more of like a situational type of interview where they have 6 to 8 stations with different situations, and they want to see how you can answer that situation. And it's usually like an ethical question or a policy question, so you want to make sure that you brush up on those topics and know how to like spontaneously deal with that. And then, like Hasna said, make sure you show that you're a person, be able to have a good conversation. They see all your grades and extracurriculars on paper, but they want to know that the person that they're bringing into their school is a friendly person, is empathetic, can work well with others. So just, show that you're, a normal person and that you're kind, you're helpful, and you want to do this, you want to go to their school.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Whether you're applying for professional school or for residency, if you're at an interview, that means that you already meet their requirements for academics. They know that you're smart and that you can succeed in their program. But what they really want to know is, are you easy to work with? Can you combine your training with interpersonal skills? Are you a team player? So you don't want to just go into an interview and say, I work well with a team. You want to have a scenario or a situation that backs your, those common themes. So they might ask you, give us a situation where you think that you could have done better in your treatment with a patient. And then you should have a story on hand that tells you how you learn from your experiences, how you work well with others, basically just carrying those common themes. And like what Wajiha said, you want to make sure you stand out in a positive way. So maybe if you have rehearsed your story, but not necessarily rehearsed your response. As Hasna mentioned, it's important to be well prepared. But again, you don't want to sound robotic. You want to make them see that you can think on your feet, you are well-rounded. And one of the ways that I like to practice is there are quite a few YouTube channels that practice interview questions with you. So you can play the video and they'll ask you interview questions and you can just pause it, think, and practice how you would answer. But my best advice would be to just come up with a list of scenarios that help to project who you are as a person, and not memorize them word for word, because you don't want to seem robotic at all. And overall, like if you just have that confidence, be like calm, cool, collected, and they'll tell that you are well prepared for this role.
Also, a lot of universities in undergrad and graduate school have a lot of like networking and professional development days and events where they prep you for interviews and walk you through how to respond and go over your CV with you. So definitely like take advantage of those resources. There's a lot of career development resources at universities as well.
I know I keep saying this, but the pre-health committee at our school also did like a mock interview with us, and it got your nerves into that mode, and it was like a bunch of people asking you questions, looking over your application, and I think you should definitely find out if your school does that and arrange an appointment with them to get yourself prepared for your interview like that. it was really helpful.
Yeah, once you're in, sorry, Mara. Once you're in school, like you're an undergrad, there's so many resources to take advantage of on all of these topics that we've been talking about this morning. Like there's so much out there available to you to utilize as a college student, and I would definitely try to take advantage of as many opportunities as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I know it seems like you have to force yourself into an uncomfortable situation. A lot of times that is what it entails. You have to step out of your comfort zone and push yourself. But with every single time that you do that, you'll become more and more prepared for the next interview. And it's just a game of, you know, getting used to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like really, really good points. I guess to finally wrap up, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a high school or pre-health student beginning or in their journey towards, you know, their career of their dreams?
I would say that you don't have to have it all figured out. You are a high school student, you're 18, you're so young, you have your whole career ahead of you. You don't have to have it all figured out to the minute details and don't stress about it, but it is better to have a general plan, like a general direction, just so you can kind of guide your college career and then your actual career with less stress. So in being in these programs, I know we're very blessed to have very structured programs, so they kind of guide you through it as well. And that's one advantage of being a pre-health major and then a health major, is that things are a little more constructed for you. But I would say that overall, I know it's easy to say and not easy to do about the stress level and the imposter syndrome and everything that we're talking about, but inshallah, you'll end up where you're meant to be, doing what you're meant to do. And you just have to have faith in Allah and support from your family and friends and lean on your community, because that's what they're here for.
I couldn't agree more with Hasna. I think we all are victims of feeling like we can't do it. There's been so many moments where we're just like, you know, why am I doing this? It's so hard. But and you look at other people and you're like, how are they doing it? But you kind of have to, you know, put yourself into perspective and be like, you know, I've gotten this far. Whatever is meant to be will happen to me. Focus on yourself, do what you need to do, don't look at others, and just try your best. And if you get there, you know, it's meant to be. If you don't, I'm sure there's other doors that will open up for you. There's always a plan. And if you're sincere in your prayers and your goals and your intentions, you know, your future will be good, inshallah.
I think it's important to remind ourselves not to be discouraged, because ever since we were, starting off in high school, you will always be applying for something. You will always be, you know, striving for that next step. But at the same time, remind yourself that being rejected it's not rejection. You're being redirected in a sense. Sometimes I think back to when I was in high school and I really wanted to go to this one specific, Ivy League university. And now I look back and think, what if I had done that and not ended up going to NJIT, doing the 7-year program, finding a career that I love? So I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. And maybe you are being redirected in a certain way, but don't be discouraged. Stay strong and, you know, keep working towards your goals. At the end of the day, don't be afraid to seek advice and reach out and ask questions. It's funny, Hasna's older sister is a dentist, and she was one of my biggest mentors, you know, in high school, and she did the same program as me. So if you just ask around, there's so many people, so many resources within our own community. So I would say definitely do not be discouraged and ask for advice when you need.
Thank you guys so much, Jazakumullah khairan, for all your advice and sharing your knowledge today. I'm sure, you know, all our participants are going to be walking away with, you know, things that they learned, things that they're going to try fixing and applying, and even myself as a pre-health student to try to improve going forward. I just like to thank everybody for joining us today for our 2020 healthcare panel. A huge, you know, thanks and appreciation, round of applause for our 3 panelists for joining us and sharing their knowledge. Alhamdulillah, we are able to, I guess, extract gems from our alumni community to help share their knowledge and their advice. You know, in this case specifically to healthcare, but in other careers in general. So again, if any of the participants would like to reach out to the Alumni Association, we can always link you guys up, inshallah, with the panelists for future advice. And if you have any questions regarding the Alumni Association, please feel free to reach out like via social media or our email address, nuialum@gmail.com. And that pretty much wraps up our event. So thank you everybody for joining. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome, Sam. Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.